I've never done a mastermind.
No funnel, no coaching empire, no six-figure podcast blueprint. Just almost 2,000 episodes about the ocean. Welcome to Monetize This. I'm your host, David Beckemeyer, and today we're speaking with someone the podcast gurus don't know what to do with. Andrew Lewin, thank you so much for making time for our little program.
You bet, man. I'm super excited to be here.
So tell us the name of your show and where we can find it.
Absolutely. So my show is called How to Protect the Ocean. It's all about literally how you can protect the ocean, how you can live for a better ocean. I provide a lot of resources, new news that's come out on the ocean, and basically how you can live your daily life, to protecting that ocean. If you go to my website, speakupforblue.com, you'll find two podcasts, actually, How to Protect the Ocean and Beyond Jaws, which is about a shark podcast. But if you go to there, you'll be able to find both of those shows and be able to listen to those. So speakupforblue.com.
It sounds like you kind of got the, got what this show is kind of about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I started it because this whole, you've been doing this a while, so you know this probably better than I do, but, this whole kind of podcasting guru space, it's great. It's mostly speaking to people that, have created a podcast for their business, or they're hoping to turn it into a business, or it's a funnel for something else. And there's not much out there speaking to, like, what if the podcast is the thing? Like, what if that's your thing? And there's not a lot 100%. Speaking to that, right? And I get it. Like, there's a market in the other place, but that's what what this podcast is kind of trying to fill. We're kind of trying to validate that, we feel that way too, kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Like that. Like, my podcast was made for people to listen to things about the ocean. Cool things, not so cool things, what we need to do to protect it. That was the whole goal, and that's like the basis of my quote unquote business. It started off more as a hobby to stay connected with the ocean, and then it just it kind of became a bit of a business, because I'm like, I would like to do this more full time, but it's like trying to find how to monetize. How do I get paid for something I really, really love to do? Working on it, but it's definitely interesting. And every time I look, like, I've got a really niche podcast, and every time I look at, like, oh, this person made $200 and some odd $1,000 from their podcast, but they're in finance, or they're in tech, or they're in something else. And you're just like, well, that's not me. How about, like, the ones that we're just podcasting to inform people?
Andrew kept trying to make the podcast world make sense. The podcast world kept insisting he should sell something else. So I wanted to ask, you've been doing this for a while, and, I think, as far as I know, you haven't slapped ads on it. It's not really a funnel. You haven't launched your, $9.97 Ocean Mastermind. Have you ever worried that podcast police are going to come after you?
I know, right? It's interesting. I've been paid doing certain things with the podcast. So, for instance, but they've all been in line with the podcast. I've been paid to have people come, like, to kind of take over the podcast a little bit. So there's an alliance with some of the, like, with Pew Charitable Trusts, Conservation International, which are big organizations, and they wanted to take over during COVID. They wanted to do a podcast on on what they're launching, this Blue Nature Alliance, which is marine protected areas in local communities around the world. And they paid me to do that. I had an in with one of the people, and they're like, let's go on the podcast, who really likes the podcast. And that helped, like, inform people at the UN on what they were doing. So that kind of, like, went to some pretty cool stuff. And I've been flown to, like, Malaysia for a conference and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But from a revenue generating item, no, I've never done a mastermind. I've done some courses. I did launch a course back in 2013 on how to get a job in ocean conservation. And then people were pissed because they said that they didn't want to have to pay for something like that, because their university should have you know, they just went to university. They have a, you know, they're in debt and this and that. And I was like, well, yeah, but I'm not your university. Like I'm a guy who spent time doing this. But regardless, you know, that was the market there. And it sold a little bit, but not like others that sell digital courses. I've tried to mold that. I did try to mold the typical marketing, as you mentioned, like mastermind, things like that, certain parts of it into the podcast. And it just hasn't really worked, you know, to get that full-time kind of money to go to do this full time. But yeah, no, I've never done a mastermind or anything like that.
With the history that you've had, you know, we've had sort of, I don't know, I guess I'll say scammers, but we certainly had opportunists, let's put it that way, trying to sell people stuff a long time before the current social media trends and all that. But have you seen, you know, so I'm sure you've been getting, you know, people, you know, trying to sell you something basically since day one. And, you know, I'm curious at what you've seen, how that has changed. What was some of that advice you got early that maybe you were tempted to take and then you're sort of glad you didn't take, things like that?
I think, you know, as you mentioned, there's a lot of gurus out there, you know, so-called gurus out there that have come up with a plan to be like, if you do this, you know, this strategy, you are going to kill it. You are going to get, you know, the biggest downloads. You'll be number one in your niche. You know, you'll be this, you'll be that. And the more I am in this business and the more I do podcasting, the more I become skeptical of these trendy types of movements. It's podcasting is the long game, right? It's one, I'm going to outwork most of these podcasts. I don't care about the size of my audience. I care about how it impacts my audience. So if I stay at the same audience member, like obviously I want to get in front of as many people as possible, but if the audience I have continues to enjoy my podcast, that's what it does. So I haven't, like, I've received, like, I've taken some courses. I've definitely bought some courses. The courses that I bought, they were expensive. And I feel like the difference was I was already established, like, as a podcaster. So a lot of the I've put my work in. I've listened to podcasts like The Feed from Libsyn. I listen to Dave Jackson, you know, on a regular basis. Those I feel like they're the true gurus that come out with industry information, come out with the positives and negatives of the different options that are available. And so, like, I kind of look through their kind of lens and be like, is this something that, like, you know, free hosting? And I'm just kind of like, this doesn't make sense, because usually they want something, you know, and a lot of the free hosting will use your, like, in the terms and agreements, you're just like, they'll use your podcast for advertising if they want, you know. And it's like, I've learned certain things like that, like privacy is important, making sure you own your intellectual property is important. And so, and then, like, some of these, like I've heard a lot of people try to sell me podcast SEO. I haven't seen a podcast SEO software or strategy that's actually worked, you know, in terms of, like, keywords, like a Google would, you know what I mean? Like a search engine optimization would for Google or for YouTube. I haven't seen that happen here. And maybe I've always said, like, I'm not the best SEO guy, so maybe that's what it is. But although I did change the podcast name a couple of times to match, so I would get, like, hit on for Ocean. Because when I first came out with the podcast, my title was Speak Up for Blue. That was because that's my company name. And blue meant ocean. But when I actually typed in an Apple Podcast back in the day, Ocean, my podcast didn't come up. And I was like, well, I should be ranking for this. And so once I put in for Speak Up for the Ocean Blue, I started ranking for it. And then I realized people didn't really know what that meant. So I put in how to protect the ocean. So I had ocean in there. It's really simple, of, like, the title. It's exactly what it's designed to do. And so I, you know, again, but I've heard people like, oh, we can help you with your SEO and this and that. I get emails weekly, maybe even daily, about how to improve my show and the rankings and this and that. And I'm just like, you know what? it's all BS.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, we can get you up on the rankings. You're going to go to a clickbait farm and you're going to subscribe and unsubscribe and subscribe until I gain the charts. But I look at my charts and I'm like, I'm the top 100 in like 30 different countries, up and down as it goes, including like my most downloaded countries. So I'm like, okay, like I can handle that. And then you get people who are like, well, I'm the top 1% of listeners, like my podcast in the top. I'm like, but what of what? Like, where is this metric coming from? I don't know if I forget is it Listen Now or Listeners? I forget what the site is.
Notes or whatever. Yeah.
Listen Notes. Yeah. And, someone explained to me as well, it takes up all like 4 or 5 million podcasts that are out there, and it ranks where you rank on that, and it puts you into a percentile. But we know that there's really only maybe like 300,000-400,000 podcasts that have put out a show in the last 90 days that are considered active. Well, where are these other millions that are coming from? Like, you're ranking yourself against millions, but you're not really in the top one. If you're top 1% in that 300,000-400,000, well, maybe that's impressive. But like, it's kind of like a metric that I just don't get. You know what I mean? It's like, why put a metric that, yeah, it makes you sound good, but it's not really going to do you any good. So I think just even putting it into metrics, I'm just like, like people listen to my show. Like, I like it. When people talk to me like, hey, I really like your show. I'm like, great. That's awesome. What do you like? What do you don't like? I want to sit down. I'm like, let me buy you a beer. Let's have a conversation. What can I do better? How can I serve you better? That's really what it comes down to. I went to Duke University to do a course on environmental digital conversation and marketing. I was walking around and I had met this one woman who was a fan of the show. And she's like, you're the reason why I'm doing a PhD right now. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, she was working at an oyster aquaculture plant. And, sucking oysters and like cutting herself, and it's in the rain. And she was like, she didn't know where her career was going. And, sometimes it's hard work. And she goes, your podcast got me through it, and it inspired me to go back to school to get my PhD. That's impact. Like that's the impact that I like to hear. I did a show with a woman. She was sexually assaulted when she was a grad student, and she came on to talk about her journey through that, and not feeling to be protected by the university. And then she actually worked with a senator in that state that she was in to get better laws to protect students. I found out a couple of weeks later that the organization that funded the person who sexually assaulted that reached out to her and said, we had no idea that this happened. We are now changing our sort of terms in how we treat and how we choose and how we hold our grantees up to standard, and we're changing it based off of this story. So not only does she help enact laws for students to be protected, but she's also helped, turn around the way grantees are held to a certain standard. I had a guy in Australia who was originally a plumber, and he contacted me. He's like, because of your podcast, I not only quit my plumbing job, but I started an organization where I did beach cleanups around Australia, and this is what I've been doing. Again, I don't expect that to happen to everybody, but the fact that people listen and they change their lives because of it is the exact mission that I want.
And after almost 2,000 episodes, the surprising part isn't that Andrew never built a mastermind, it's that he still sounds happy to be doing this.
I'm here in Ontario talking about the ocean every single day. And I can do that, and it makes me happy. I may not get paid for it. I may have to work another job for it, but this is what I've wanted to do for a long time. I just didn't realize that I would be good at communication. I never would have come to this if I wasn't in Ontario, if I knew I had to do something. And podcasting has allowed me to do it. So it's definitely changed my entire outlook on careers, and sort of leaving a legacy and inspiring other people to do the same.
Maybe the real dividing line in podcasting isn't independent versus corporate. Maybe it's people trying to extract value versus people trying to create it. That's it for this episode of Monetize This. Check out Andrew's work at speakupforblue.com. If you know someone making a podcast because they actually care about the subject, not because it's part of a funnel, send this episode to them. And if you're one of those people yourself, you can subscribe wherever you're listening or find more at monetizethispodcast.com. I'm David Beckemeyer. See you next time.